we're underway. The next item is acceptance of the minutes of the January 11th, 2023 meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Oh, so moved.
Moved and second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, any omissions? John Sasso has joined us. Any corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote on approval of the minutes. Mark Doxer.
Yes.
Nora Bucko, so I'll get you.
Yes.
John Parsons.
Yes.
Ron Assini.
Yes.
John Sasso.
Yes.
John O'Neill, yes. Okay. Moving on, and this might, well, let's see, feasibility study for site of new center. I think that was what really was discussed yesterday evening. Is that correct from what my wife?
So I think we talked generally about the idea of it, but
Okay.
didn't really talk anything beyond that.
Oh, okay. So do you have news for us?
So, no news. So let's just kind of review where we were. That's probably the right way to start here. The town received 2 responses to the request for proposals. One of them is 17 Herndon, the former Walgreens building. The other is 25 Haven, which is the former Rite Aid building. Those are the only 2 responses. The board has conceivably 90 days to respond. We either have to pick one to decide to negotiate with them, pick one, or pick the other, or pick neither. So the board will be meeting in executive session next Tuesday night to have, that's the next step kind of in the process. We had talked about 2 different approaches on feasibility study. The initial one, and where we got some ARPA funds allocated, was the notion that we'd hire somebody to explore the different potential sites and check out the feasibility of each one of those. When Walgreens became available, when Fidel knocked on the door, Walgreens suddenly said, yeah, we'd like to talk. That kind of changed things in terms of how do we want to think about it forward. We kind of took things under advisement, the select board did, in terms of thinking about it. And before we formally decided yes or no, that building got sold. It got sold to a group that has some affiliation with the past owners. And in the response to the proposal, the current owner gave the rights to negotiate with the town back to the group we had originally been working with.
Oh.
But that would be the negotiating group. So last night there was a discussion, is this potentially available? The answer is yes, and they've made a proposal to the town. So that's where we are. The question of what do we explore and what do we need to do in the exploration? If it turns out to be that building and the board agrees to move forward and we reach a deal with them, the next steps would be not so much a feasibility study of what sites are possible, but more detail of this is what this could be. This is what it will take. It's hiring a project manager and it's hiring an architect that specifically would work on developing that project. They come out with plans and a dollar amount. And that's what we would end up taking to town meeting. Well, first to the select board for approval, then to town meeting for approval, and then to the voters for approval. So that's kind of a one site approach.
One site approach.
The advantage of that is speed. Things could happen very quickly. I think I said last night, maybe everything in terms of town approvals could be done late in 2023. That is probably reasonable that could happen.
So a vote, if things proceed, so a townwide vote would be what? So not in April.
I don't think we can make April. So it's February 1st today. I don't think April is possible.
Okay.
So we'd have to have a special town meeting, which happens pretty regularly. We then would probably have to have a special election because I don't think there's another election that's planned right now. So it'd have to be a special election to deal with this issue. And then the board has to kind of decide the approach. But at the end of the day, we need the town to really like what the proposal is and support it through town meeting and through an election. So that, those all have to happen regardless of the building that we choose. Haven Street probably is a little bit slower than that in terms of activities. There's more work to be done. We haven't done any environmental assessments or any other testing of anything. It likely is a tear down given the condition of that building. So that's a slightly longer process. I think other sites at this point are a much longer process. So last night we had a discussion about what's going to be done in the near term. One person I think kind of said, if this is 10 years,
Yeah.
doesn't really help me. So we're very cognizant of that and trying to figure out kind of how to do it. So, if the board feels that there's a path forward here with one of the current sites, Tuesday night will be an executive session discussion to see what's going on. And I would envision if something were to move forward, then we have the money already in hand from ARPA. So we could do the study, we could do the development, we could hire the project manager, we could hire an architect. That's all available to the town at this point. So if it seems reasonable to the board, that's the fast track. That's what could happen. Another option is to kind of look at more sites, either spend more time in the feasibility study to look at multiple sites, or to kind of pick another one and start working with that. Simon's Way might be an example of that. So certainly there's open space. There is a committee that's already formed that's going to explore that. And I think that is a bit longer term in process also. We don't know anything about what's in the ground. We don't know anything about kind of the activities, and there's still a whole community discussion on what to do with that space and how to set it up. So that to me is a longer time frame, but potentially viable. There aren't any other big tracts of land that we're aware of that are available in town. We've done 2 RFPs and we've only gotten these 2 responses at this point. We've talked about Oakland Road, and that has challenges. There aren't any other kind of appropriately sized sites. My opinion, I think that there's pretty good amount of potential based on the RFPs that we got back. I think that the Walgreens site in particular could be very interesting. There is a second version of the plan that was shown last night. We don't have a cost estimate for it yet. So I don't know how that's going to come in. If it comes in similar to the others versus if it's less. The building we know is sound and structurally sound. We know the permanent building committee took a look at it, and as currently configured, it's a pretty good, strong building. The systems work. We've done a level 1 environmental study with no issues that came up. We probably would do a deeper study, but the first level came back clean or no issues to worry about. So that's kind of where things are. I think one of the questions for Recalc is kind of how do we see our role continuing here?
That's what I was going to ask.
So I think I kind of give you my opinion here. So I think that we need to finish a lot of the things that we've already been working on that kind of lead us forward to the recommendation to the town. Here's what we think the needs look like based on the studies, based on the benchmarking, based on these other activities. Here's what we'd like to see happen here. These are kind of, needs. I think working together with the Council on Aging, assess a little bit more maybe needs versus wants and see where that fits. We had our vote that talked about intergenerational in terms of what this group would like to see going forward, and based on a lot of the feedback that we got. So I think we've got that message. And I think that I'm kind of getting into the later topic, but if that's okay, so short-term versus long-term, I think the short-term is, okay, what can the team do right now? What are the things we can do serving the community? Obviously, we want to help everything we can with that. But our mission really was the next level. Our mission was, what's the next place? And how do we do that? You call that long-term, but I'm worried that long-term sounds like it's way out. It's 5 to 10 years, and it's not. I think it's 1 to 2 years. I think our mission is to come back and say, here's what needs to happen. And select board, if you make a decision, Recalc has a role in helping define how that goes, in working with the architect. Do we want to have a building committee, or is it Recalc that's working in that function? That's a discussion that I think the select board needs to have, and board members here should talk about also. How really are we going to take it forward? If there's a decision, a go decision. And also, if there's not a go decision, how are we going to work from that? I can't answer that here because the select board has to talk about that. And that's going to start as an executive session. But if the board agrees to move ahead with one of the projects, they'll come back to open session and have that discussion and share that with the community.
Okay, because we did talk about a building committee at our last, we established, I think it was you, Ron, and myself.
Right, as a group.
As a group, as a group,
Yes.
Working. My thought is though, should it be a joint committee with the COA? I mean, that to me is what would make sense, because we do sunset and the Council on Aging is gonna be with us.
Yeah. I think in terms of having representatives at this point to help think about it, that's perfect. When the last school was built, when the high school was built, there was a separate committee built, and it was largely technical in terms of what was going on.
But we have the town building.
We have the permanent building committee, absolutely, that they'll be involved, and maybe that serves that technical role, because that's certainly where all the expertise is. And we heard some of it last night, which was great in terms of structural and other issues. And I think that's fantastic. So then the next question is, what's the community representation, if you will, and how is that structured? And I think the select board should talk about that a little bit, but I think it'd be great for this group and the council to certainly have a lot of input, but to think about that and how it might work. I think there's a third thing that we should think about, and that is that the schools benefited dramatically from having nonprofit groups that could go about and go fundraising, substantial fundraising. And they were able to take care of a lot of the fixtures and furniture and things inside the library as a result of fundraising efforts. And I think that might be a really helpful part to get going. Government can't start it. It has to be private citizens that do the work. And we have great examples. The school PTO systems do it. All the sports leagues do it. The library has 2 different nonprofit associations affiliated with it. Those are some things that we probably should be exploring also, that I think would really help, kind of no matter what building we're looking at. The money that those groups can raise actually helps programming too. And as I don't know what you folks heard when I did my interviews, particularly like in Linfield, they talked about how much money they raise through their nonprofit. They talked about a thrift shop inside and how much money that raises. And Stoneham, same thing. They said that actually pays for a lot of programming. So I think that's another area we want to explore. I know it's slightly off of the building, but it's all kind of coming together into this question of how is the town going to decide to support X dollars for the building and X dollars for the community.
Right, and as we'll see in John's summary, he highlights that, and I think that was in UMass as well. But then again, it comes to me that in the communities that I'm familiar with, the Friends of the Council on Aging, they're usually not made up of like Council on Aging members necessarily, but have some, but they're what they business people. You get the wider community, people with money. That's who you get involved. So that's something that's bigger than RECALC.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we need to maybe find a way to kickstart it a little bit. Maybe identify some people to talk to that might have interest in it and see if we can encourage them to start something like that.
Is there another kind of successor to Nelson Burbank in the community? John?
Yeah, I guess it's not at all possible for a town entity to go out and raise money, but I know Elder Services got money from the Reading Cooperative Bank for the computers that got put down. So how does that happen?
Well, my understanding is that the tax deductible is not if it goes through municipality. Municipality also, most foundations are not allowed to give monies to a municipality, a town. It's against the their regulations. So the bank could just do that because they're not, worried or concerned about, tax thing or whatever, but that's generally reasons why you go for a friend's.
And, we'd appreciate all the support we can get, there's no question. But something, think of Cummings Foundation, think of the Eastern Bank Foundation, groups like that. I believe they'll only donate to nonprofits.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
So I just want to get us back to the question that you asked earlier, John, which is kind of like, so what is the feasibility study piece all about? And we did talk about this last week. So I had a couple different things that I want to pursue here. First, so, the way I've seen feasibility study occur in other towns that we've looked at is, at this point in time, the materials that we've created, the information we've solicited and the reports we've put together, we would kind of package up and put a little bow on it. We'd hand it over to a project manager and a architect and say, here, go look at all this stuff and come up with options and look at different sites and give us proposals and different things to create. And that kind of goes to the second part that Mark had talked about is, well, we could have them go look at all these other things and therefore have a wider set of options. I don't think I'm hearing that is what the town is proposing or wants to do at the moment, at least based on what I heard last night and what we've been talking about. It sounds like we now have a set of established options. Maybe they're not all explicit, but at least a list of probably a half dozen based on what I heard last night. And what I also heard Mark say is that, so the select board's going to go into executive session and bash this around a bit. And my question, and it's just a question, is how does the select board make a good assessment of each of the different options as it relates to what they could buy or not, if you will, from a property perspective or otherwise? And so I guess I was under the impression that when you had asked us last week about a subgroup of folks working to look at feasibilities, I was actually thinking that there would be this set of options, and this group would then take the work that we've done, all the needs we've looked at, all the building type requirements, and I'm going to use, for lack of a better word, would score each of them, would provide some sort of a guide and assessment and put that forward in terms of all the things we just talked about: timing, cost, how many of the needs, and all that stuff. And so I know what Fidel presented last night seems to have provided some of that information, but I certainly don't think I would say it's complete. And I would say if there was a activity, and again, I'm not volunteering Recalc to do this because I don't know if this was what Mark had considered, but that a group, whether it be Recalc plus COA or whoever, should literally go through these options and score them and then give the select board that sort of feedback as to whether any of these really satisfy all the pieces, or which ones have the most benefit, yet with some drawbacks that we may have to live with. And I guess I was thinking that's where Recalc and COA and this sort of feasibility group assessment would look at. So I don't know if that was your plan or thought. Obviously, it's not going to get done in a week, given that you have the select board meeting next week. But I would say, in my opinion, that would be the next logical step, is to look at, what those options potentially could be, what the needs and wants, if you will, are being met or potentially being met, what the drawbacks are, the timings, the cost to what we are, and then present that to the select board so that they could use that in their deliberations about, are any of these going to work? So I guess that's where I thought we were, and I'm going to stop there on that. But before I finish, I just want to mention that I agree with you, Mark. I think this whole facility thing that we're talking about, that's really been the focus and charter of Recalc. I think from the summary report, I've always viewed that that's not the whole story. And that I certainly think that in parallel with all that, there needs to be continued effort on kind of the operational day-to-day and what things we can do to improve the situation, and how that folds into what a new place may look like. There is this longer term perspective, which is, okay, how do we reconcile that with all these other needs that we may not be able to meet today? But I definitely believe that those two pieces, the facility piece that we need to sort out today and the kind of the operational piece, are the challenges that whether it's Recalc or COA or whoever needs to be pursuing. So I don't know what your plans or thoughts were about who was going to do that. I don't know what your plans or thought about whether this is something that could be done in support of the discussions. But I would say that's the next step from that standpoint.
Sure. So all makes sense. I think we're in pretty strong agreement here. I think the reason Recalc was formed reporting to the select board, the reason we've been having public forums, the reason we've been doing all these things is to kind of bring in as much information as we could to understand the needs in terms of what's going on. The board's decision is bigger than that. The board's decision is not only what makes sense, pros and cons, but what seems likely to be approved by the select board, town meeting, and taxpayers. And that ends up being the judgment of the board, supported by whatever other information we can bring in. But we have to kind of figure out what that is. And last night we talked a little bit about, hey, why don't we just build from the ground up, and we can take care of everything, and we can. I just don't think the town is going to be supporting that. And so as a member of the select board, I wouldn't be supporting that. I don't think that's the right approach here. So getting as much input as we can, I think we've been trying. We'd love to get more. We're still, exploring one more option at Walgreens that was shared a little bit last night. Don't know enough about it yet, other than, it's a bigger option. But I think the board kind of has to make kind of quantum decisions quickly. We will not have the option of pursuing both of the items that came back from the RFP. It's either A or B or neither. Those are our options. And, that's kind of it.
Well, if I can just say, so that's in terms of potentially purchasing one of those sites. I get that.
Right.
But I would say potentially purchasing one of those sites in and of itself doesn't necessarily give you an explicit, this is the solution. I mean, to your point, Fidel presented two potential options at the former Walgreens site. Now maybe the Hendron Street site, there is only one option. You got to tear it down and rebuild something. But even with that, how all of that plays together, I would think is somewhat influential on that decision. So I get the point that yes, there are some either or not decisions in that. I just was trying to understand how what additional input is necessary to help with that decision, and also understand the implications of it.
Yeah, no, I think wide open to the input. I think what we want to be careful of is over specifying. With a given amount of space, there's a lot that can be done with an architect that kind of understands the needs. Our mission was to kind of provide those needs so that we can almost hand off a package to them, saying, here are the basic needs. Yes, there's going to be a lot more input that's coming and a lot more specific kinds of things. But generally speaking, site A versus site B versus site C, can it achieve the needs? Can it achieve the needs now? Can it achieve the needs into the future? How much will the taxpayers support now versus the future, right? So, happy to get all sorts of input, any input we can get. But if we're going to move this along at a reasonable pace and to comply with these RFPs, there's a tight window for doing that. And even if we move ahead, we still would, that only allows us to negotiate with that party.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get that.
All right, let me, if I can, just recharacterize that a little bit. So your perspective is the select board is ultimately going to make a decision, yes, no, maybe on each of the sites effectively. An attempt to, which again, still requires negotiations, still requires some additional level. And at that point, if you do decide to move forward with one of those sites, there's still the process of doing kind of the, what is it going to look like? That still is there. Okay.
Huge.
So then what I would suggest that, again, I'm just trying to understand where we may or may not fit into this, is at that point, then maybe, Recalc and COA and others could sit down and say, all right, we've decided to purchase, I'm just gonna throw, we decided to purchase 100th Street. We're gonna tear it down and rebuild it. All right, let's put together the group to really flush through what it is that we think we can do there and look at that and make sure we understand the implications and run through what needs are going to be there and which ones aren't, and how that's going to affect some of the other ancillary issues that we've been talking about: transportation, parking, programmatics, et cetera.
Yeah, and just add, with the help of a program manager
Right.
and architect with
Right.
specific expertise, and
Right.
probably whatever other people we decide need to
Sure.
be in to help us do.
Okay. All right. So then it sounds like, based on that relative to the current activities of Recalc and moving forward, there isn't, even though you quote unquote created this little feasibility group, it doesn't sound like there's anything at the moment that you are asking of this group to do today, pending a decision from the select board. Is that a fair statement?
So I think that for this group, and I'm going to kind of quote from your things here, I think there is a need for communication to the community on a much broader basis to understand the need that's out there, right? And to continue to have public meetings to bring in more input in terms of what that looks like. But the starting point has to be that the community is aware of the situation and the need to take action now.
Sure. No, I was just talking about this concept of the feasibility study group, if you will.
Yeah. So there, I think that it may, even if the select board decides, yes or no on a particular property, I think there's still value in looking at some of the ideas that are being kind of talked about, and we can share that information around. What are the needs for, we talked about, dance space. We talked about it has to hold X people. There might be a little bit more detail that we can talk about there. It may be that people see, we had discussions about where should administrative offices go. What makes more sense? Have them on a separate level from all the activities. Maybe that doesn't make so much sense. How to kind of think some of those things through from the perspective of staff, from the perspective of COA, from the perspective of Recalc. But then, to your point, I think we need to get some expertise brought in. I'm not really wanting to call it a feasibility study, but more kind of a detailed study of what's going to go on. At that point, I think there's a lot of input that we can add to the activities. That's where I think it makes a lot of sense. That may be a few weeks away. That may be further than that away.
Yep.
I don't know the answer to that yet.
And that does not require any town meeting type of.
Not yet. So what's interesting is typically a project would have to go to town meeting like the school did and get some money to do the next level study.
Yep.
We had some ARPA funds, and between the ARPA committee and the select board voted to allocate some of those funds to do this, to move it ahead faster and further. So we're in an enviable spot. We've got the funds to do it. Now we're going to decide what to spend those funds on that moves this ball ahead.
I just want to, say where I'm coming from on this. I was very sympathetic to John's, point of view as far as it would have been nice in a perfect world that we did this feasibility study and explored all options. We're not in a perfect world. My fear on the other side is if we strive to have the perfect setting, we will get nothing. And I think that's a real possibility if we're not careful. So, the pragmatic side of me says, okay, if we can get a concrete commitment to a location that seems, at least structurally, has the potential to fill a lot of the needs, And then we can provide the input to make sure as many of the prioritization of those needs. I think we've done some work towards that, but that's really, important. And then what John talks about as far as, operational, like transportation, I mean, there are a lot of, I think we could already be doing more in the transportation now. I look at, if you look at the Reading Times Chronicle and look at the Burlington page, at least once a week, it's in there. It's letting people know that there's Uber subsidies for within, for very reasonable amounts for elders. And to me, hey, that would be great. We talked about, shuttles from parking areas. So, I mean, that doesn't have to, that's a need today. It's going to be a need, tomorrow, and whatever we do or don't do. So I would like to, and I think that's why John's summary is really good, because it highlights that. And I think we need to be taking steps, supporting the Council on Aging, make sure on the, the budget recommendations that, as much push as we can behind those things as possible occur.
Yeah, I think to your point, the transportation is there's a structural element to it as well as programs. But regardless of where we go, we need to think more about transportation than we are.
And 100 parking spaces that, that architect, I don't think any group, that's at all environmentally conscious should be advocating for 100 parking spaces for anything. We gotta do better. And you're not gonna be able to, we don't need any more, impervious space.
Right.
There's just so.
Yeah, and to give you a little flavor, so the Newton new active living center. So that is more than 3 times the size of our community. Total of 150 spaces between municipal spots and spots right there. That was their guideline. More than 3 times our size. So this idea of 50 that we're playing with was trying to kind of take that into consideration and understand what's going to make sense here. But I love your point. We need a better transportation solution.
Yeah. And
it's not just parking.
And it's not just for the, whatever senior center or the existing Council on Aging. Seniors, if to the extent there's more and more pressure on older people to give up their licenses or whatever.
There is, to your point about Burlington, there are a lot of systems out there now that they're Uber-like, but they're volunteer based.
There's that. Those are tougher though. I'm familiar with those.
Yeah,
that's a toughest. Well, if you keep it within the community, it's possible.
Yeah.
But I know what killed a lot of those programs used to be sponsored by like groups called Fish. That when you had to go into Boston, actually a volunteer to go in, fighting the traffic, don't know how long you're going to be there and getting out. That's when you start losing your volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Newton has a system, I think, that's similar to it's Uber style. It's called Numo or something like that. It's Newton Mobility, something like that. It was just in the Sunday Globe talking about, they're basically advertising it because it's growing, because it's so successful. And it's a inexpensive alternative. So if Recalc could take on some projects like that, that would be, I think, very helpful no matter where we go. But it's a structural element of the next level of our senior support system. I think that fits really well.
Isn't there somebody already working on transportation?
So there are some volunteers that are starting it, yes. And you probably had a discussion last night along those lines. And yes, and then it's kind of, okay, how do we get some volunteers to work on that and start building it out? Does it live inside of Recalc? So this group has built a lot of interesting expertise and knowledge just by having visited all these other centers and talked to other people and started making some connections. And John, you got tons of connections already in the system as well. We can use those to kind of help us figure out what's the best way to do things. That would be great. And the council has a big role, particularly on the programming side, where we're more kind of structural, as I'm calling it, kind of going beyond kind of a building to structural stuff. The council got a big role as the staff in figuring out how do we, what's the programming we're going to do. And someone asked me last night, is there a plan? And it was great because I would say there sure is. There are all sorts of plans for how do you grow? How do you add more programs? How do you add more activities? Where do you put them? it's getting built out, and Jenna and Chris are very actively working on that. The notion of, let's just drop in, 10 new resources and see what happens is not a good approach
Not
here.
without space,
What's that?
not without space.
But you need space, but also how do you kind of build that? So Wellness Wednesdays are growing, different activities are growing. There are more and more people coming to the center. Awesome. Great. Keep building. And as we have more stuff to do and more places to put it, I think it grows. But to your point, if we wait for perfect, we're going to be waiting a long time.
Also, I would add that, see, in my experience, staff are in a tough spot. Just like at the state level, they report to the administration and finance, and they're told that this is how much you're gonna get. And I don't know how many times, we're told that you're not gonna be able to get that. But when we advocated really well with the legislature, we got it. We got more than, we were told we were able to get. And so I would urge the council, to, staff have to be practical in this, they report to people, understandably, but that doesn't mean, you can't be pushing. And hopefully this council on aging will be pushing.
I can just jump in again, sorry. So I want to bring us back a little bit to back to the original question. So it sounds like at the moment, as it relates to the physical facility building piece, other than potentially, as you said, Mark, some kind of internally structural things that we can kind of look and assess at, there isn't anything more at the moment that you're asking of Recalc as it relates to any particular site. Is that a fair assessment?
I think today, yes.
Today. Okay. So, well, well, that's important though. So, but let me, the second piece, we've been talking around all these other things, and I do obviously want to get to some of the things that we as a committee have recommended. I mean, I think there is a huge need still to look at all of the needs and plan for how do we meet this stuff over time, and what does that mean? And I absolutely agree that there needs to be not just a communication perspective, but kind of an advocacy on the part of elder services and building out a plan and getting some more finances from a town meeting perspective. So I without a doubt, I think that needs to happen. I just don't know, given where Recalc is, what the expectations are that either you have or the select board have for how Recalc should, or if they are going to continue to be involved in that sort of aspect. Because when we first actually met as a group, not to bring up old wounds here, but I kind of advocated, hey, we really should be doing some stuff and looking at these things, and that was not our charter, and it still isn't necessarily our charter. But I certainly think it is a huge need, and to your point, as we have collected up knowledge and worked with people in the community, I think we're uniquely positioned to be able to kind of help with that. I just don't know how we do that, what the charter is to get that done, and kind of what the directive, because we have town staff, as you say, that are working on these things as well. But I I look at this from a project perspective, and there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I just do think that we need to kind of take that step back and figure out, okay, what are the priorities that we want to work on, and how does that flush in with all the needs that we're trying to meet, and all these programmatic things that are happening, and all of the recommendations that we've come forth, putting aside whether we build a new building or do something else. There's all that still exists. So I just don't want to, I certainly don't want us to be in a position where we're stepping on somebody else's toes, or for that matter, are going beyond what we're being asked to do. But relative to us being able to do it, I think we have I'm going to pat ourselves on the back. I think we have a capable group of folks on Recalc, and certainly those that have been willing to work with other people. I think we've established good relationships both with staff and with COA. And I think we can continue to leverage those to improve it. So I leave, I'll leave that statement with, I'd love to go through what it is that we think we found out in general, but I think that decision has to be made about how you want us to proceed. We can continue communication. I think we do. We still need to kind of finish that piece, at least from our standpoint, but we are going to get to an end unless we get some more direction and activity.
I think you're spot on. I think that the select board owes, I think it'd be great for RECALC to come to the select board, but the select board needs to provide some additional direction, either continuing with something specific or offering a new charter or additions to the charter or changes to the charter.
Or say thank you and farewell,
Or yeah. But so, I mean, I view this in a good way that we're progressing. Things are moving ahead. At the moment, there's a little bit of a hold, but I think that the hold within 2 months, the hold is certainly going to get released and maybe even sooner than that.
Okay. Is there any last words on the feasibility aspect before we move on? Seeing none, okay. Review of the summary of RECALC's work and an updated memo report from UMass. Well, the summary report, and there's John is sharing the,
I think that's me.
oh, that's you.
Someone else is sharing it.
Oh, okay. That's Jenna sharing the screen.
So I have received just.
Thank you first, John. for-
Great job, John, on this.
Great work. Yes.
So just a quick knowledge. So I did actually receive some feedback from COA, which I have not had an opportunity over the last day or two to incorporate. But I'm definitely what I'd like. So Mark, you said earlier we need to continue communication. I mean, as I was writing this, I was like thinking in the back of my mind, we need to figure out how to, communicate this to the rest of the community, in terms of the results of our work, in terms of at a summary level. I know this is not the summary of the UMass report. This is the summary of RECALC. It's a little different.
Right.
So I tried to expand it from that standpoint. And I tried to answer the questions that we were chartered with specifically. I mean, we can certainly walk through this. Obviously, my objective is to get some feedback and I'd like to get an update of this so that I can send it back out to everybody. And then from this, I was thinking, number one, put together a mini newsletter, and number two, we can put together a little presentation and go back to the select board with this if, Mark, you think that's appropriate.
I do. I think that's a great idea. And when you're ready, I have some feedback.
So let me just, I'm gonna walk through this quickly. I think the most important part in my mind is the executive summary, which basically says, this is what you chartered us with. This is how we did it. These are our recommendations. And then as far as the needs are concerned, again, we were asked to be very specific about identifying needs. I tried to translate those between general needs and facility needs because we kind of were chartered with both. And I tried to draw upon the information from both the summary reports from UMass, as well as the site visits, as well as focus groups. I tried to kind of synthesize all that information as best as I could. And then the other section was on, community center versus senior center, or I should say intergenerational center versus senior center. And I tried to reflect the discussion that we had last week in that, or 3 weeks ago now, sorry. Just to say that we do feel that the community wants to support that. But I think the committee and feedback is that we need to make sure we're meeting our senior needs first. So I kind of left it at that. And then kind of next steps is really up to others to decide. But I mean, next steps is to kind of pursue those recommendations, which is, better communication, work on some of the issues that we have today, and figure out how to improve the facilities. So in a nutshell, that's all this says. Obviously, there's a lot of details behind it, but I'll stop and hopefully get some more feedback from you guys.
Yeah, this could not be communicating with the local newspapers and things like that to promote the report a lot more.
I think we can. I know we can.
That seems to get noticed quite a bit.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Completely agree. I think we can do it.
So Mark, you had some
So
specific,
a couple of thoughts. And first of all, John, I think this is fantastic. So the clapping was before, but I really want to applaud that. There are a couple of things that I think can be very helpful kind of structurally in terms of what's going on. One thing that I had a lot of comments on was the notion of short-term versus long-term. I think that ReCalc's mission really is focused on what do we need so that we can take that forward from a building perspective, much more so than anything else, kind of the structural side. I think when we say long-term, it sounds like, well, in the future, outside of our scope, these are the things you want to think about. I think the messaging to me felt far out, not in a good way, far out, but far out, far away. I think it's important to bring it in much closer. I think that these decisions are upon us, and I don't think long-term is the right way to express it. I think it's got to say in the next 2 to 3 years, the next 2 to 4 years. I think that that's much more powerful. It's much more accurate, and it's what we focused on. I think it is what we did. It's what we were thinking about. So that's kind of my
In the
biggest.
near future, is that what it is?
Yeah, something like that. So, some of the short-term things are kind of what we do today with existing facilities and programming, but the next step is really what our charter was. And that is, in the next few years, this needs to happen. I think it's much more action-oriented and powerful, and I think it is, in fact, what we did. So that's piece
What
one.
you're saying in the long term is really, people think of long term, they're thinking 10 years out
Right, or even
versus
5.
a couple of years out.
Exactly,
It's different.
exactly.
So,
but
let me,
noting the fact, excuse me, Joe, that the 2017 study said it was needed then.
Yeah.
So we're already
Right.
5+ years.
Yeah.
Right.
so, Mark, that's great feedback. Can whoever's controlling this, can you go back to the recommendations on the first section for a minute?
Sure.
Where it says short term, long term?
Bottom.
Oh, it's on the bottom. Sorry.
No, up top. No, on the top, in the executive summary.
Yeah.
So it's described a little bit more detail. So, okay, right there. Oh, let's stop, go down, little down further. Following key recommendations.
Yeah,
Okay.
there.
So,
Yeah.
1 and 2.
so stop right there. So, so this was my intent. So, I think obviously it didn't come across that way. So there are 3 quote unquote short-term recommendations there, if you will. And my perspective was the first one was really related to things that we could do within the current world of fixing problems, whether it's transportation, programmatics, or whatever. That was my first perspective. The third perspective was the communication, but the second perspective, at least from my standpoint, was the idea of building or facilities. And to me, and again, perhaps it didn't come across appropriately now as we're talking about it, but my thought was that item B was really we want to get a better facility for the work that we have today. And so what I thought about for items, the reason why I broke out part 2 into longer term, and we can certainly talk specifics of timing, was that we talked about meeting our senior needs first. So if we're going to build a building or make a structure change or whatever, it was my thought that would then first and foremost be focused on maybe what a quote unquote senior center would be to start with. And then as that building and those programs were put in place, we would then figure out how to enhance that to include the other intergenerational aspects of the needs. That's how I had thought about it. Again, maybe I was wrong in that perspective, because I think the answer is we're not necessarily talking about we're going to build a senior center today, and then tomorrow, 3 years from now, we're going to build a brand new center and call it an intergenerational center. I didn't think that was the case. I thought it was like, well, we're going to build a center today. It's going to be focused on a senior center, and then over time, we're going to enhance it and expand it to allow it to cover these other things. And maybe it's just simply because we don't have staffing, maybe we don't have funding, but maybe it's a different perspective I had. So that's the reason why I broke it out like that. But I completely understand the comment.
So John, I think that I interpreted B or kind of item 1 as more, let's work with what we've got and let's, then we're gonna do some work to explore what the future is gonna be. And then number 2 was kind of the future. And as you've described it, I hear it very differently. And what maybe it needs is that, B is do the feasibility study, and C, so I'm going to insert a new C and move your current C to D. The C is do it, build it, get it done. That's the piece that I think would, the action piece. Let's do it now. And I think, John O'Neill, your point on, we heard it last night, we've known we've had these needs, we've been working on it. It's time to do it. And that's maybe having something that kind of says do it is that turns the corner. It does. That's what I was kind of looking for.
Oh, that's good. No, it's really good feedback. Like I said, I love to put stuff out there and let people tear it apart, because that's how we'll get something that people understand. No, that's.
Hopefully this is more nudging than tearing.
I don't mind it. No, tearing's okay.
I can offer a couple other quick comments. 2 of the things, a little bit, it's more tonality. If you go to page 5, where it talks about affordability, so yeah, 5 of 8, so one more down, one more after that. Yep, the bottom one there. So I had a different takeaway, which I kind of shared last night a little bit. So, here it talks about, $200 or more per year was only 23%. Those willing to pay at least $100 was 46%. And to me, that was maybe more key or also key, however you want to look at it. There was a willingness by almost half the people. They understood that you can't get it for free. You're going to have to spend some money, and at least $100, which could translate to $10 million or so in project. You got basically half the community that responded already said, I'd do that. And yeah, I see a sharp drop off, but the 46% isn't mentioned here. And I think to me, that is crucial. Yeah.
So what you're saying, the 23% looks extremely low for people willing to pay, without mentioning the $100 for the 46%.
Right.
Yep. Okay. No, that's fine. That's a good add.
Do we dare go what the people who advocating for Killam to say, since the high school and the library going off the tax levy, that a portion of that should be also, not the whole thing, and we know, but Killam was going to use, all of it. I'm just, like $300, I guess, it amounted to on what the taxes would be annually for the average person. I think that's what they were saying.
Well, I don't think they know yet, but.
Oh, no, that was going off, that could be applied.
Oh, this one, so it's 100 that's coming off roughly.
100, I thought they were saying more.
The 3 projects
Woods End,
together.
high school.
And library. I think that's about $100 total between the 3.
Oh, I thought the slide that they showed at town meeting had like 300 total, and it was gonna be 600 altogether, so that's kind of like, that's the,
I will check.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's $100 total
oh, okay.
that are gonna come off. Those were times when construction was a lot less expensive. I think it's $100 that comes off.
I would caution putting anything like that in here, quite frankly.
I think that
If it's only $100, then yes, I wouldn't do it.
so
I don't think we can mention Killam in here.
yeah, no, I mean,
Oh, no, I wouldn't.
well, except in one way. I think that my view is that we have 2 giant community priorities to do, both, not one and the other. And you heard the speech last night. It's not A and then B or whatever. We have 2 giant community priorities we need to take care of, right? In terms of the taxes we all pay, it doesn't matter kind of what it's going to, it's still taxes that we're going to pay. We need to do both. We need to do both now meaning in the next few years, right? Killam is probably still a few years away from starting, but not 5. And if we were waiting for a good moment when there's nothing else going on and the taxes are all low, it won't exist ever. That's not the nature of things. The beauty is that we've been planning really well in terms of when buildings come in, when buildings go out. So we finished three distinct projects are gonna come off the taxes. That's awesome. There are two that need to go on. And they're both of these. It is Killam and it's the senior center. It's not, I just, this shouldn't be a competition other than to say to people, folks, these are the highest priorities of the town. You really need to do. The competition is gonna be to get the word out. Period. And I, you know, I most certainly don't want people kind of comparing or, well, you know, what's more important. These are the top two priorities. They need to get done. That's what this town should stand for, getting them done. And you know what? In another 10 years, as we've done other construction, the next building is going to need to be done again. The next school is going to require, or the next whatever, or beautiful old town hall or whatever. There's going to be another project. It's the nature of things. They need to cycle up and cycle down. And hopefully you don't have 10 of them that all happen at the same time. Instead, you have a couple that go in, they come out, next ones come in, they come out. So how we say that, I think, is that the community is going to be, you know, the end of those projects does offer a drop of relief, and it's time for the next projects to come in. They are Killam and the senior center. That I mean, I personally won't support it exactly that way.
I have to separate off things that I would say like a town meeting myself personally from the recalc. Because as an older person, I'm saying, you know, unlike a lot of people, once my 4 kids were out of the school system, we didn't move. We're paying taxes, most of which is going to the school system. I'm fine with that. But also, if you got 25% of the population, I think you need to pay attention, and they deserve a portion of the pie. That's, you know, that's what I would say personally.
Yeah.
To the,
I think you're spot on. And I think that the community needs to kind of think about it that way. And you know, 26%, whatever the number is, it's growing to 29% by 2030.
Yeah.
It's a big portion of this community. And we know people, our study is great. People want to stay here. We know that. They're going to need more services. We need to be able to provide them. We don't have the space. We don't have the structure yet. It's building, and it's a building.
and hopefully, it's pie in the sky, I know, that people will make the connection in a positive way to, hey, all the more reason to support Killam. You know, I'm gonna support Killam anyway, but, you know, if they can see a nexus, you know, we're getting something from our tax dollars. You know, and it makes us a better community. It helps everyone as far as the quality of life in the community, what we can afford. Let's,
The question I have is there going to be an appetite to make the decision twice? Once, there's got to be the senior center on a special vote all by itself.
Mhm.
A year later or 2 years later, Killam will be a special vote as well too. And that'll be interesting to see if it happens.
well, I think Killam is a lot stronger position today, and hopefully, though, that's gonna be part of our mission and with the Council on Aging to,
But senior center will come first.
right, but
But I think if putting them together, they'd have to be separate items on the same ballot. And now you got a real competition.
Oh, you sure? Oh, I agree. I agree.
It shouldn't be a competition. This
So
shouldn't be
in
a
some
competition.
ways, senior center is in a better position because
I think there are arguments on both sides.
Sure.
Again, I think the reality is that what do we stand for as a community? I think these are the two biggest things that are there, and we need to do them both. And not everybody's going to agree, but coming back to kind of where we are
Yes.
here, we got to focus on what's this report
Mhm.
saying? And I think, you know, John, your point of John Sasso, I think we focus on the senior center. Can we say that there are some projects that are completing and coming off the taxes? Sure, I think that's fine. I don't think we get into.
oh yeah, no, I wouldn't,
things.
yeah.
But, you know, these are capital projects. They're important. And we need to figure out how we're going to pay for them.
To your point, Mark, and, you know, John, as far as part of the feedback, that was one of my concerns that when we talked about, when you talked about what we can do now, which I think is important, and you've always kind of like drawn our attention since the very first meeting on that, is that people say, well, if you can make do, and you are making do, we'll give you a little bit more money in the budget, but well, then is there the need? And that's why I'm with you, Mark. I think we have to say, we need a building, we need a dedicated building
And now,
now, so while we're waiting, yes, you try to do as much as you can. And once again, John, you highlighted, we need staffing, they need operational support. That's there, but you need a home.
Yeah, I guess I would say that if it doesn't come across that way, I certainly think this group believes strongly that that is the case. And our report should reflect that we feel strongly there is a need for an improved, enhanced, whatever term we want to use, facility to support the needs of our senior population and serve as a bridge to an intergenerational center. I guess that's how I would couch it in my words. The issue of affordability that you guys have been talking about in terms of where we come with that, I guess I would say the challenge of communicating and prioritizing at the town level is a little bit different. I think it's a bit outside the scope of our purview to a certain extent. I think the scope of us making the case and communicating that absolutely is our purview, and we need to continue to do that. And hopefully this report and the work that we're doing, the communication, the stuff that COA is doing, I think that all serves into it. And you're right, at some point, the town is going to have to make a decision. Is this what we want to do? Is this where we want to spend our money? And, that's a question that we're going to have to leave to the voters.
Do we, there have been some things that have been raised at like the open sessions. Like, let's say, the comment, a couple of people that we already have community centers. We have the library, we have the Y. Should we even address that kind of an issue, or just kind of like that's not for us to, because, to me, I have some concrete arguments against that, but I don't know if this is the place to make that. Like with the Y is a regional private corporation. That's what it is. And it goes, pay the fee and.
Expensive to seniors, yeah.
Right, and we're talking about affordability, that's one of the priorities, and that's, that doesn't help.
I'm gonna read between the lines a little bit on that. I think when it came to the concept of the intergenerational center, there was a lot of feedback of, why do we need an intergenerational center? Because we have all these other resources in town for folks across the board. And so what wasn't said in that sentence, and I'm going to read into it, is, but we don't have all of those same kind of things across the board for seniors. That's where we have the senior center. And so that's why we still need to invest in it. It's why I still believe the priority should be focused on whatever we do up front needs to be focused on meeting the needs of seniors first. And that the intergenerational center, maybe that's a bit more of a philosophical concept. I'm not necessarily trying to push it down. I'm just saying that it may be that the town may have to come up with other ways to meet those overall needs that may include taking advantage of whatever building we end up with. And it may also include leveraging some of the other resources. I don't think, at least in my mind, that we heard, at least in a loud voice, or a large percentage of people saying, well, we don't need a new senior center. I mean, there were some that said maybe we don't, but I think that was a relatively small amount in the overall survey in terms of the feedback we've heard. And again, those that have said, look at other resources, I think that was in response to the question of, why do we need an intergenerational center when we have all these other things? Now, that's how I'm reading it. I mean, others may have taken that differently.
Can we just go back to page 3 in the recommendation? Mark, you said you wanted to insert it, sort of, let's build it, make a new C. It's almost like That should be the first thing that gets said, right? A. Select board, make a decision on a site selection. Seriously, I mean, otherwise we're still,
Well, not, we don't say select, but I think you're right as far as we need a new building.
we need a new building,
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's a select
Uh,
board already,
make a decision.
So it's a point, above these other
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a good, no, I think you're right. We should be
A little bit more
making
bold.
that bold statement, right?
Yeah.
That, I think that's what you're referring to. Yes,
Yeah.
Someone-
I
Okay,
think that's appropriate.
If I could add to this too, and it relates to your question. So certainly we have to address any question that the community brings up. But I think there are two sides to that issue. One is the notion of, what does an intergenerational mean and what additional facilities or needs does that mean? The other side of that is making sure what John said is that we're taking care of the needs of seniors first.
I think that's wise in your part, John.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think that the words that actually were used, and I've heard discussions that I've had with various community members, various members of COA, this notion of dedicated senior space.
and time.
And yeah, I think it's important to kind of highlight that as this is the driver of things. This is what we got to take care of first. And I would love to see whatever facility we have available 24/7 basically into the community. But there's some needs, the needs of seniors come first. There's discussion of longer hours and weekends and things like that. And with multifunctional space, I think there's a lot of other opportunity too. I think it can kind of cover the board really nicely. I interpreted intergenerational is the ability for different age groups to be interacting together,
Yes.
not to just be in the same building at the same time,
Yes.
but to be interacting in different ways.
Concerts,
Programming
lectures.
together.
programming. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right, and our staff has been talking a lot about this collectively and separately. So Elder and Human Services has been having their own conversations, Recreation has been having their own conversations. And then we've come together and talked quite a bit, and we're coming up with a memo to send to Recalc about our thoughts from a staff perspective on the separate spaces for seniors, separate times for seniors, but also the importance of that intergenerational aspect, because there are some younger seniors who don't want to go to a senior center. That's one of the things that I heard a lot about when I went to the Salem Community Center and the Lexington Community Center, said they received a very large uptick in participation from younger seniors because there's just a stigma that comes along with it. The other great point that one of my staff members made in rec, my new recreation administrator, Ariel, she said, well, and how great would it be if, there's a grandparent who watches their grandchild and grandma can go to Zumba
What a best.
and, little Ellie, 2-year-old Ellie can go to a tot program. So simultaneous programming going on certain days, and just the capability of using our resources collectively, because we all share in a very wide, we're separate in our demographics, but we all have the same talent level and the same passion for programming. And a lot of it is similar operationally. So we're looking forward to sending something to you guys and having you digest it and include it in the report somehow. And I think Marilyn also has her hand up.
Okay,
Is that good with you?
sure.
right.
Marilyn?
Unmute, right, Marilyn?
There we go. Thank you, Jenna. I just wanted to add on to, it's not just keeping the focus on a senior center, but it's going all the way back to the 2017. We need a bigger, better senior center, and one that's not only more inclusive of the community as a whole, but more inclusive first of all the seniors, because right now we're not. So I see us being an expansion in whatever building it is. And to the extent it could be intergenerational, great. I mean, it'll make a stronger community potentially and has a lot of upsides to it. But the first and foremost in my mind, and I thought that was where this whole effort started, and going back to 2017, is there's an awful lot that isn't happening yet. And it will take more staff. It will take a bigger, better building, or at least one that's certainly a whole lot better designed, if not physically more square feet, although I don't think you can really get to where we need to go without more square feet. So I just wanted to add to what I'm hearing is a theme that's growing here, that it's, senior center first. And not to say that we don't care about the others, but that was the driving force in all of this. And to whatever degree we can capitalize on that as an intergenerational, great. I think that there's nothing but plus to be said about it. I do think when we think about some of the programming, I worry with the survey, you can see things like both groups said they wanted more exercise. Well, that's fine and dandy, but exercise classes for 70-year-olds are very different from exercise classes for 30-year-olds. And some people are still fit enough to bounce back and forth between both. But I'd say the majority, they really need instructors who are watching out and reminding people, if you've had hip surgery, don't try this. If you haven't, try it. Things like that that are really not the focus of a class that's aimed at 30-year-olds. So it might not be that that's the same class and you can put everybody together in it, which the survey kind of says, oh, look, exercise class is great opportunity, but it's not anywhere near that simple. And I know everyone knows that, but I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And it gets back to that. It takes a lot to focus first on what the senior center needs are. So I think I'm supporting 90% of what I'm hearing, but I just wanted to throw my 2 cents worth as one more voice in the audience saying the same thing.
And I'll, concur and maybe expand a little bit, is that when I say a home for seniors, that means that the problem could be, especially if you do a decentralized thing, let's put it that way, is then you have to pack up everything. You have to set up things, put it away. Where do you put it away? At the end of the night, if another thing's coming in, that's there's some real practical considerations there, and roadblocks if it isn't. On the other side is because I was already thinking that about grandparents, because I see it in my neighborhood all the time, and of course I've done it with my grandchildren. You see people who are responsible on a day-to-day basis for their grandchildren. They would love to have a little relief. And one of the big attractions of some of these more sophisticated exercise places is that they have a little thing for children. So why not allow that for some of the older people? It provides a respite as well as being able to allow them to engage and socialize with people that are, their own age and everything. So things like that, I think would be great. And I think in John's report, one of the strengths there is he addresses head on something that did come up from a number of people, is that let's make sure that all of the resources of the community are talking together and working, like the rec committee, like the library, those kinds of things. And John, nails that. I think he really got what people were saying and puts it down there. So that's a real plus.
Yeah, and Sudeshna was there last night as well, the director of equity and inclusion.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
From the library, so.
Yeah, but there are programs that are being developed together. I mean, look, seniors are not fully included community.
And also mindful of the fact that seniors are not a cohesive group. It's not like we don't think alike. We're just like we're like we were before we were seniors. With all those differences and everything else. And the only thing that brings us together is when when they're going to attack something that only seniors can get, like Social Security, Medicare, those kinds of things. But also a senior center. Even if you don't want to use it, I think you want to say, hey, if I want to, I want it to be available. And I want it to have some of the things that interest me. And let the interest determine who's utilizing it. So you're going to have, there are going to be some disabled people who are going to be in the same maybe situation as far as needing specialized exercise programs or whatever that fits right in. You don't want to say we're going to do it. What I used to say in my agency when I developed new services, I told the board, I'd only develop services that are gonna primarily benefit older people. But to the extent they can benefit other members of the community, like we had AIDS, that kind of thing, so we did home living meals to people with AIDS, regardless of age, because you already have, I think that's an important thing to do, to be inclusive, that, if you have, designated services, once again, designed for older people and other people in the community can benefit, that's great.
Yeah, it's a win for everyone, and I think ultimately, if we're talking about gaining townwide support, that younger families will be more likely to vote for an intergenerational community center. I could be wrong, but
Right, but I think John's thing and what Marilyn said, and I see it now, I didn't necessarily see it as clear cut, so John, explanation was very helpful to me. Seniors needs, that's what started it off in 2017.
absolutely, yeah.
And I've always been a big believer is if you get a facility, one, you should be utilizing it as much as possible. But make sure you're maintaining it, which is a big thing. When you high utilization means you got to be very careful. Make sure you have your downtime, your cleaning, all those kinds of things are taken care of, so that the whole thing doesn't collapse. You can do too much. But then transportation, once again, if you have transportation not just to the senior center, but for other things that seniors can need, if you come up with some affordable ways for people to get around. Because what do you hear from older people? The biggest loss is independence when they give up their car. That's why they fight and hang on to it, maybe long after in some cases, when dementia has already started and things, then they should.
94. I took my mother's car away, she's 94. So,
Yes, took it.
See, also as far as, the ride program, like I know Marilyn had indicated she thought it was just for low income. It isn't. It's public transportation. It's supposed to be, to the extent that it's supposed to serve all the public. If you get people who are disabled or, physically limited, who can't utilize the regular, public transportation system, this is the public transportation system for them. We should have them come, and now you have to go, I think it's the Chelsea or Charlestown, to make the case with our state legislature, have them come out, and have a day and tell people, there's no stigma to this. The taxpayers are supporting this. And this would be a really good way, not only within the town, but you could utilize it to go into things in Boston. And that to me would be a big, I'm sure there are a lot more people eligible for that in Reading than are signed up for it.
Yeah, so maybe just educating folks more on that.
Including me. Thank you for correcting me.
Okay, is there other thoughts? John, you've been looking.
No, everybody's saying pretty much most of the things that I'm thinking of. Just that one thought that I had, but Jenna pretty much summed that up, is we keep talking about recalc and Council of Aging have to do something. Elder Services is going to be a big part of this too, because they totally understand.
Mhm.
And my biggest concern is how are we ever going to get the information out to all the other citizens in town, the parents of school-aged children now, of just how bad the senior center is and just how much we really need one. You can tell them 40,000 times about this 2017 report. We've been sitting on it for all these years, but it's gonna, they're gonna go, oh yeah, okay, fine, but it's, we've got to find a more solid way.
What pictures? Because I remember with the library, when they were showing the leaky ceilings and broken, that
Yeah, that's.
made a, impact. Some of the older overrides for schools in the past, same thing.
Can you simulate?
Always creating a video, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why my hand's up. We're well into work on developing a video. We're working with RCTV. We're meeting on it again tomorrow night, in fact.
Oh, great.
It's coming along nicely. We've got a narrator, we've got a draft script, we've got RCTV ready to start filming. So I say it's a group, and Nancy Zimlak is to credit her credit in getting us all organized, but we've got a number of others that are working hard on it. Nancy Twadros and Jean Prado, and I think there's a couple of others in here as well. My apologies to anyone whose name I'm not giving credit to at the moment, but it's a team effort, but Nancy's done a fantastic job of getting it going.
Great. Now, is your hand still up?
No, I'm putting it back down.
Okay. All right. Because until Jenna tells me, I don't know if somebody has their,
Ah,
their hand up.
no problem.
Okay. Any other input?
So just back to yesterday's meeting a little bit. The
Just
gentleman in
on-
front who,
Is this on the summary report?
no,
Okay, so
I thought we were done.
that's what I just want to
Okay, great.
make sure that everybody has, made the comment. Because John, put in a lot of work to it. And so I just wanted to make sure we,
I appreciate the feedback. I've gotten some other comments. I will take what we discussed tonight and I'll work on an update and get that out probably in the next week or so to the committee.
okay, great. So move on then to the communication efforts. And Marilyn already told us that. John, did Nancy, has she been in touch with you? Because remember we established that at the last meeting when she was on with us, that she was going to be communicating with you and you with her?
So I am aware that COA is doing a video. I've actually spoken with briefly, Nancy and I have exchanged emails. I've also spoke to the other Nancy as well about kind of status. We have a communication plan that we're going to continue to work. I think that's something that Recalc should at least continue to express. But the advocacy work that COA is doing, starting with this video and even some of the poster boards they've done up, that's kind of being done under COA at the moment. I think we're aware of it, and I think they fold nicely into what we're trying to accomplish overall. There's not anything more. I've offered, if there's something that we can do to let us know, but I haven't had any specific requests at the moment.
And I didn't want us to be duplicating.
We're
Yeah.
not, no, we aren't, the video that we had put together, which unfortunately I wouldn't say is that was that great, but was intended to be kind of a what if. The video that COA is putting together is more of a, this is what we have, and here are some of the deficiencies and issues that we're facing, which is a little bit different than what our intention was at the time. So we certainly, I think if, assuming we move forward, taking the video that we put together, i.e. I'm going to call it the what if video, it would be worth doing a reboot on that, assuming we move forward with one or some of these other options we've talked about, and then actually could even make it a little bit more specific. But for the moment, no, we're not doing anything more on that.
Okay. All right, so next steps for communication efforts, John, Marilyn, do you have your hand up again?
No, actually, it's back on another point. Finish the communication thing. I just have another point afterwards. Thank you. I'll put my hand down for now.
All righty.
So I think, at least in my mind right now, I want to finish the summary report, and then my intent was to try to make that, maybe excerpt that into a newsletter, or at least put it into a set of presentation slides and go back. I was just suggesting that we go back to the select board with that. I think Mark shook his head yes about that. So if he feels comfortable with that, I think that would be my next perspective on that. And then I think at that point, we need to decide what else we want to do. We haven't really taken it beyond that. I think the additional communication questions that will come up will really be contingent upon some of the decisions that have to be made in the next couple of weeks. And then, we'll know based on that what we should be doing.
Yeah, we do push it a lot on social media and through email blasts and elder services and recreation. I'm not sure if we can maybe add the summary report to the town manager newsletter that Caitlin sends out for Fidel. I think that goes to a wide range of folks in the community. I was also thinking of Edline through the school department, and perhaps it would be also worth it to send something to the school committee.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming we're gonna post this on the Recalc site. Again, as I said, I think it would be nice to make this into a little presentation, because I think people like that, to see it that way. But it's certainly, there's enough content there that I could, translate it into at least a one-pager newsletter as well, which I think would be worth it. So yeah, we can do all of that. And then I think beyond that, John, will really be dependent on what the next steps are in terms of how the town decides to move forward.
You're referring to,
I'm referring to the decisions
what
that the-
direction from the select board as to.
Right. And what else they then ask us to do at that point? We still don't really know specifically what, if any, role we're going to have beyond that. So I think that has to be answered. And, my goal with this was to kind of tie this together and answer the questions that we were asked specifically, and have that information in a place so that whoever is charged with doing the next step would have a good baseline to work from.
We also have our lunch and learns. So Fidel and Mark presented at the last one, but if someone from Recalc would be willing to come to one of the lunch and learns and present the summary report when it's finished, that might be really great too. We had a pretty good turnout there, or Wellness Wednesdays even. Got 64 people there today.
Actually, today I went to Wellness Wednesday and they knew the meeting was last night, so I got a lot of questions. And I said,
Yeah.
Senator Cal, about that. So I think that's a good idea.
Now, this will translate very easily to a presentation. I'm sure of that.
As far as a reboot of the video, how likely is our timeline? Just
I really,
pressure on you to do it, but I'm wondering, as far as a presentation, it'd be nice to have both, but
you guys can comment on this. I don't think it would be worth doing a reboot of the video at this moment. I think
Okay.
I would rather, I guess if I had my druthers, I would rather wait and see what the select board does and what their perspective is, because then we could actually incorporate that site decision into the video as well, and then use that as the what if, and then show some of the other pieces. And so I think it would be a lot more tangible at that point than the way it was today, which was, geez, here are a couple things that other centers have done, but then to understand how that would fold into a potential site, I think that makes it a bit more tangible. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, because that's probably gonna be the new charge for Recalc, is to promote the decision the select board makes.
You looking at my
Yeah.
slides?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm just, it's just the way I see it.
Yeah.
That'll be our new charge, really. We've done all the work to take the 2017 study and say, yeah, that study was real and the town really wants it.
It's right there.
And now it's our charge to be the communication vehicle to the rest of the community, to advocate and support.
now, do you need further direction from us, John?
With respect to,
I mean, as far as the communication plan, you are gonna, you're taking the summary, you're revising that.
yeah, so there's, I mean, again, the summary report update is the first priority. Once I have that done and communicated out to you folks, I'll probably at the same time meld that into a presentation. Maybe Ron can help me a little bit with that, because we did that the last time, and I think that was very helpful for me to bounce that off of somebody as we did it. But really and then putting that into a newsletter is, again, for me, that's a pretty straightforward thing as well. But those are like I said, those are the only communication plan items at the moment that I have vision adding. And so I until other decisions are made, I think that's as far as I want to plan out at the moment.
Okay.
John, I'd like to help you on the newsletter side as well, so I have some ideas from that.
Absolutely, great. No, I trust me, I can't do it all either, so I definitely can use the help.
Marilyn's hands raised again.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we,
Sorry, I didn't know if you saw it or not.
One thing to think about also is the reality when it's time to get to the voters is successful campaigns go door to door. And even last night, there were some folks who were talking about not being online, not being able to access reports and things.
Hmm.
But they, not only would they prefer hard copies, they volunteered, one person at least, volunteered to knock on doors and hand them out and go around that way. And I think that's exactly what we're gonna need to encourage. So we need to have COA, recalc, in the town coordinated our communication. This is one of those, it's the exam where it's a multiple choice test, and option A is you do this, and B you do this, C you do this, and E is all of the above. This is E, all of the above.
Yeah.
No question.
And hopefully the select board will all of the select board, will take this on as well, depending on the vote, depending on where.
Yeah, I think that you heard from all 5 members last night.
Yeah.
Individually. So I think you heard a good amount of support.
Mhm.
Heard a lot of support.
I was surprised when my wife said there was a good turnout, because all I could think of is January,
Yeah, it's freezing.
nighttime, seniors, unpredictable weather, boy, it was,
5, roughly.
so that was,
And it was recorded. It
Yeah.
was streamed live, but it's also
Right, it's
recorded.
on
I
on
don't-
YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
RCTV,
I
yeah.
got emails from people this morning who had watched it since.
it's good.
So, I mean, I guess I would just add that, I mean, certainly we can continue and expand the communication plan once we kind of know what the direction is. But for now, my intent is just to kind of bring it to closure with those couple items.
Okay, now Marilyn.
Thank you. One is, I remember who I forgot all the town staff. Jenna and Chris and Jean Delios also are helping tremendously on the video. My apologies for not getting you in the first pass. We saved the best for last. But the other thing is that the content of this video is solely on conveying what the shortcomings are of the current center. So that's exactly what we're trying in a visual way, as well as the words, obviously the narrative to convey. We're not getting into options or anything. It's just, here's why we feel there's a need. Let us show you the senior center. And so that's focused
So,
like a
so
laser on
basically
that.
taking the 2017 report and making it visual. in
Yeah.
some ways, right?
To 2017 and all the additional problems that have come in the interim. But yes, we're trying to do that, and we're trying to keep it to around 7 minutes, and RCTV is lined up to run it whenever they've got breaks and all sorts of wonderful things for us. So, and we're looking at, and I know Jenna, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're aiming mid-March. Was that what the latest was on this? I think we're moving as fast as we can on this. So hopefully in 6 weeks-ish, maybe faster, maybe a little longer, but definitely not later than March. We discussed a lot. I just don't have the date at the tip of my tongue. We're expecting that to be ready.
Well, it seems like we have time. That'll be,
Yeah,
because,
yeah, actually that was because they're
Yeah.
looking to capitalize on the February vacation because the school kids help on this a lot. So they're looking to really have them chugging away on stuff in the February vacation. So it is March, definitely.
intergenerational approach.
Yes, there you go. The concept in action.
So it was interesting when I broached it with the school committee, people were there as far as intergenerational. And I talked about it from seniors being involved in assisting younger people. And they didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
Followed up with me, including the superintendent, but it was all about jobs in the school department if seniors wanted to do it. It's just the regular ads, that's all, that's what, so I was kind of disappointed in that. I think we have a lot of education to do with our public education people. Okay, anything else? Any other business that came up within the last 48 hours that we couldn't have known?
I guess
about?
the only thing I had was that, that gentleman in the front that yesterday's meeting was recommending Walgreens and keeping the senior center.
Like
It's on the PDC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rebecca, would you say-
He
well,
mo-
What was that again?
Walgreens and keeping the senior center is
He was,
it's a campus like.
he was somebody from the permanent.
Permanent Building Committee.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the idea of a campus, the idea of if we're spreading a little bit, not being too far away,
Yeah.
is certainly, possible. I don't think, we're trying to deal with the
Mhm.
new space, and there are options for
Mhm.
Pleasant Street. We'll talk about what those are, but I think if we try to just bring that in right now, it just pushes everything
Confusing.
Yep, I agree.
down the line a
I
bit.
agree. It was just interesting that someone else come up with that idea. So, yeah.
It's great. So, I mean, there are lots of ways to get new space.
Okay, nothing else. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh,
Next meeting?
next meeting, yes, that was the item. Okay, next meeting. Certainly after select board. Uh, So 2 weeks, 3 weeks? We have the meeting on the 27th?
She might have to change that.
Oh. They've already changed the
No,
time to
it's
6:30, right? That meeting on the 27th?
Yep, it's at 6:30 with the architect, for now. I know Mark is unable to make that meeting, so
Oh, okay,
I'd love to go if I can, but I can't go on a Monday night, so, sorry, but I cannot be there as an option too.
okay.
I'm sure you'll see all the plans before, right? Before the meeting.
Feedback's important.
But if we need to reschedule it, I'll let you all know. So the 27th, and then if you guys wanted to meet on another Wednesday in February, it would be the 15th or the 22nd of February.
And one of those is school vacation week, right?
One of those is SWEC. SWEC meets on the 15th.
It's that.
Simon's Way Committee. So they'll be in this building. But if everyone's okay with just meeting in person, I can explore like a different location. Seems like the majority of us are here.
Well, first, let's go for a date and see what would be people's preference.
Can I just maybe pick 2 dates? I know there's a discussion of doing it really quickly, so that presumes the board takes specific action.
Mhm.
It's possible, so plan that, but also in case they don't, I'd have another date as a backup, so in case there's a decision not to have that quick meeting, have the next date set up too. So I
Okay.
just, let's do 2 dates.
So the 27th is a meeting with the architects.
Mhm.
So maybe a meeting after that.
No, I'm thinking before that because select board will, I think what Mark is saying, if the select board has some direction then to give us as far as, they're going to choose to, well, no, even if you choose, you still have, that's just the beginning of the negotiation. So it's not,
Right, but I think that if that's the direction that it's going,
okay,
probably some action that can get taken.
okay.
If
And the
that's
meeting's next week,
Direction, Tuesday night.
next Tuesday at the 7th.
Yeah, but again, the board may not be ready to make a decision. I can't speak to that.
Sure.
Would anyone?
Wait and see what they do and just call a meeting. You could call a meeting when you find out if what the select board has done.
Well, we need to, first of all, though, I want to have some possibilities just because so we know what people's availability is, though. I hear what you're saying. We can always cancel. So we can have one early and then one, assuming that
Seven?
the select board doesn't come to a decision yet, we could have one.
Sounds like the 22nd is the right time frame.
22nd would work for me.
Wednesday, the 20th.
Yeah, I need at least a week to do some work on this end, so
Oh, right, yeah.
So
Wednesday, the 22nd.
22nd? Okay,
Sorry.
okay. I liked having it in person, but
I prefer that too, but it's not crucial.
yeah, I mean, I actually prefer an in-person meeting, but my schedule in the evenings has been crazy, so doing Zoom for me has actually been much more convenient.
Mhm.
So,
I think this room would be available on the 22nd, so
okay,
I don't mind doing the hybrid option again.
okay, why don't we do that? Yeah, we definitely would be a hybrid, that's the way it's gonna be for, say forever, but probably.
Could be.
Yeah. Okay, so the 22nd, 7:00 here and Zoom as well. Okay, and now are we ready to
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn? The second? Okay, roll call. Nora Bucko,
Present.
John Parsons.
Yes.
Ron Asini,
Yes.
Mark Doxer, John Sasso,
Yes.
Joan O'Neill, yes. Thank you very much. The motion is adjourned. Yep, you can.
Everybody, thank you.
Aye, thanks, John.
Good night.
Night.
We're gonna end it here.